Okay, so I've got a scene here where you can see I've set up some of the materials, but I've deliberately left quite a few of them not set up. And I've tried to put in a few different types of objects so we can look at material assignment and mapping first before we go into the actual materials themselves. So you'll find with Revit, one of the main issues that you'll come across is assigning materials, especially when you're learning, well, not learning the program, but even if you've been using the program for quite a while, this can be an issue for a lot of people. So assignment usually comes down to two things. There's firstly getting the material to be applied to the object, but then there's also mapping, which I'll go into as well. So you can see here I've got one of these families selected, this stool, and I'm going to go to Edit Type, just so that you can see there's no material parameter there, and in Properties there's no material. So that's quite common. You might have seen this already if you've downloaded something from Revit City or even found one of the families in the library we've got here. They don't all have a material slot. Now, I'll select another one just so you can see if you're not sure what I mean by material slot. This one over here, this other seat, if I go to Edit Type, well, there's no material parameter there, but that doesn't mean that there isn't one. In this case, it's in Properties, so that means it's an instance-based parameter. So that means each of these seats can have a different material. And that can be a really useful thing. So this one you can see is orange. And so I'll select one of them, and then over here in Properties, I can just browse and choose another material. So I'll just choose something random, just so that you can see it change. I'll try and choose something with a different colour. Okay, so you can see now this one is a different colour to this one, even though they're the same family. Okay, so I'll go back and I'll change it back to what it was. So that's useful for things like furniture, where you want, say, a different piece of furniture, even though it's the same kind of chair or other family, to have a different material. If I select one of these other stools, you can see, in this case, there's no material parameter in Properties, but if I go to Edit Type, the material parameter's there. So if I change it here, and I'll do that, I'll make a new plastic material maybe, unless I've got, no, I've got plastic, but it's white, so I'll make one with a different colour just so that you can see the change. And then change the colour, so I'll just test your knowledge here. What should be the next thing? If I've duplicated my plastic material over here to make a change, what should I do now before I change the colour? Exactly, spot on, that's good. Yep, excellent. So remembering that, that's good. So yeah, duplicate the appearance. Worst thing in Revit, we just got to force yourself to remember it. So that's good. So if you see the number there, 0, then it's safe to change. And I'll just do a bright red, maybe a little bit darker. And, oh no, it's plastic, so I should just go for a lighter one. Ooh, that's a horrible red. Oh, sorry, can't help myself, I just don't like some colours. Okay, so what you're going to see now is that all of them are going to change. All of the stools of that type. Okay, so that's a type-based parameter. I think I'll change them back to white. And that's okay. Okay, so obviously we can change materials really easily when you have a material parameter already set up, but those original stools that I selected with no material parameter, do you know what you need to do there to change it? So maybe you'd be thinking of going and editing the family. Okay, so that's the right idea. So with that stool selected, I can click Edit Family and go to the file. So once you're into the family file, have any of you tried to change the material here and then not have it come back into the project when you make the change? Yep. And that's really common because there's already a material assigned. Everything in Revit has a material. So this stool definitely has a material, and you can see it over here. It's set to by category, but that's still a material. So you might be tempted to change it here. And I can do that, so I'll change it to that plastic. Yeah, it'll change, but what I'll do then is I'll say, okay, it's that white plastic, but actually I want that white to be maybe more of an off-white. Well, let's go for even more of a grey, just so that you can see that it's different. So if I go to a shaded view now, or a realistic view, so you can see it's got that more grey material. I'll load that back into the project. Nothing's changed. Okay, so that won't work. If you try and do it that way, it just won't do anything. You might get lucky, and the first time you try it, it'll make the change, but then after that, it won't make the change anymore. And the reason is that the material lives in both files. So this material plastic that I've called plastic white shiny, but it's supposed to be shiny. There's a version of that in this family file, and then there's a version in the project file. So if I change it in the family file, that won't have any effect on the version in the project file. Okay, so the easiest way to make adjustments to families isn't to adjust the material in the family file. The best option is to add a parameter in the family file. And it sounds technical and hard, but it's actually really easy. Just click on the button next to the material slot. So this is the material slot. Next to that, you've got that little blank button at the end. Then you can click on the new button to make a new parameter. I'm going to call this stool material. And I'll leave it as a type parameter. That's for instance. If I wanted to have each stool with the option of being different, then I could have it as instance. But if you want all the stools to be the same, then type. But that's good. Yeah. So I'll click OK, and then now I'll load it back into the project, overwrite the existing version. Usually you don't need to use that bottom option, just the top option there to overwrite the existing. And when I select the stool now, you can see if I go to edit type. Sorry? Yeah, I'm doing a recording. Okay, so now I can adjust that material. And I can use any of the other materials in this project, or I can make a new one, but I'll just change to something that you can see, like that red plastic, and they all change. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'll go into all the material settings. Yeah. Okay, so this is all material assignment. That's half the battle, just getting to the point where you can actually change the materials. And so for families, parameters are what you need to use to do that. I might just quickly show you some system families. So a wall or a floor is a system family. And that just means it's programmed into Revit, it's a built-in object, and so it's already going to have the parameters set up. If you go to edit type, I'm sure you're all well and truly used to this, edit the structure, and you can see the all the material options. So I've got a finished material for the structure, but that's not what we're seeing there. We're actually seeing the plastic here that's on the interior side. So I've got plastic gloss black, which is just a 10mm layer on top of that structure, and that's what you're seeing in the interior there. I won't spend too long on that. I'm pretty sure you're all pretty okay assigning to walls and floors and ceilings. But then the other possibility is something that's been modelled by you. In other words, using model in place. So we just have to go to another view. So I'm sure you're all used to this as well, using model in place all the time for most of the things that you design that are bespoke or one-off items in your design, like this bar. So how do I assign the material to that? Exactly, edit in place. Yeah, that's right. You can do it with edit type actually, but at the moment there's no material parameter there. Even though it does have an option there, that's not going to do anything. So I'll add a parameter though and show you how to do that. So with this selected, I can go to edit in place. Then what people forget is that you then have to select the objects again. So I've got two solids here. Don't worry about the fact that they're a bit messy, but that is the skirting, and then this is the actual bar above. So I can select that extrusion, and you can see it's got a material called metal gold. I'll add a parameter to that as well. So I'm going to click on this button at the end, just like before, and then new, and I'll call it bar skirting. And I'll add another one for the upper bar, so, or for the carcass, I suppose. So let's call this bar carcass. C-A-S-S, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so that can be helpful. It means you don't have to go to edit and place every time, which will help you a lot if you're working in perspectives. It's one of the limitations with Revit 2017 that you can't go to edit and place in a perspective view. It's annoying, yeah. It's a lot better. They fixed up most of it, so you can do a lot more in perspectives now in 2017 than you could before. So it's getting better and better. 2018 is better again, but there's still a few things you can't do in perspective. I don't know why. I mean, ArchiCAD is so much better in this way, and 3ds Max, you've been able to do this since 1990. But Revit, it's actually a different division within Autodesk, and they do things a bit differently. So it's getting there, but that's one thing that'll hold you back a bit. When you select something in a perspective view, you don't get that option to edit and place. So you have to change to a plan or another 3D view if you want to edit and place. Or if you do what I've just done, add a parameter, then in the perspective you can still go to edit type and you can change the parameters there. So I can change the material. So that's another option that might help you. So again, that's all to do with material assignment. And then there's another option, which I'm just going to switch to another view to show you. So in here, I'm going to have my bathrooms. So I'm going to change to well, actually, I'll just make a new floor. And actually, this might help you a little bit as well. If you need to add in custom materials over your floors, you might know that you can use split face and then paint to assign to, say, a small area of tiles or another floor finish within a larger floor. So you can break things up to have different materials, which is good to know. So that's an option. I'm not going to show you that option, but you'll see a lot of people do it that way. Split face up here is the tool, and then paint. If we get time, I will show you that later, but some of you might already know that one. I'm not going to do it that way because the reason people do it is because it's quick and easy, but then it actually creates a few errors sometimes. So it's not always the best option. If you've got lots of, say, tiles over your maybe concrete floor, I wouldn't recommend using split face. I'd recommend doing it the way I'm going to show you now. So I'm going to go to edit type here and duplicate this floor and make one called tile 20 mil. So I'm just going to edit the structure there. This is better than using the paint tool generally. Okay, so I've made a 20 mil thick floor, and then I'm simply going to draw that over my floor area. Yeah, I've got a floor underneath it, and I'm just doing a 20 mil thick layer above that of another floor, with another floor, and I've put the height offset over here to 20 as well. So that's going to lift it up 20 mil. And this is the way you build it. So it's actually a really good way of modelling. And then your sections are right and everything, and you think about the thresholds, and so it actually works really well. And you don't get the errors that you get with split face. So that's drawn. I'll finish it, but of course I haven't put the tile material on yet. So I'm going to do that next. So now go to edit type, go to here, and I'm going to browse and make a tile material, because it's a really good example of a material that needs mapping. So I don't have any very good materials there that I can use as a starting point. I thought I might have ceramic, but it's not there. So I'll grab a new material from the library down here. So there's the ceramic folder, and I'll just grab one of these. Okay, so I've got this porcelain material, I'll just rename that. You can normally, but also it's okay to make a new material from here. So yeah, 6 of one, half a dozen the other. But it's sometimes good to make brand new materials. So ceramic tile, I'll call this, and then just like before, I'll grab a new appearance. This time I'll replace it with a new tile from the appearance library. Oh, okay, so you duplicate if you just want to get a new material that's the same, and then you can make changes. But replace is going to bring in a brand new material from the library. So replace basically lets you choose something from the library. Yeah, that's okay, but you won't get all the options. With replace, you can essentially start from scratch, and I'll spend more time on this in a minute, but for now I'm just going to go to that ceramic folder, and I know that there are a lot of tiles there. So I'll grab a big one just so that you can see the tiles. Okay, so there's my new boring square white tile. And then I'm going to go back to graphics and put on a surface pattern. So, yeah. So the general rule of thumb, if you're not sure which option to use down here, drafting or model, the general rule is that surface patterns should be model, cut patterns should be drafting. I don't know why they even allowed drafting patterns for surface. With cut patterns, it's not actually even allowed. It has to be drafting. But for surface patterns, you've got a choice. But I'd recommend always using model. And so I'll just use 200mm square tiles. So now I'll see the tile pattern in the plan view. And then I'm going to change to realistic so that you can see the rendered version of those tiles. So the tiles here should really, well, they should be the same size. So I'll go back and make them the same. Just as a little test, how could I select the floor there, do you think? Exactly, that's good, yep. So remember, tab is your best friend when you're selecting. That's your option key. So using tab there, I can select the edge of the floor, and then I'll go back to edit type, edit, and then, yeah, we'll see. So this is 200mm. So do you think I'll be able to make this image that size exactly? Well, I know I can, because if I go to the image here, just going to click on that image, that thumbnail essentially. So we've got two tiles in the image. The image is made up of 2 by 2. So if our tiles are 200mm, that means the image in total should be 400. And that'll mean each tile is 200. Okay, so now they're 200mm, but it's still not starting in the corner. So you might want the tiles to start exactly in the corner. For your presentation, that's probably not a critical thing, that you have those exact construction details, but there will be cases where you want to move the textures a bit on your surfaces. So that's something I want to show you. So, so the way to do that is to go to the view where you can see the pattern. So notice how they line up exactly now because they are the same size. So back into hidden line, and you can actually select the pattern. A lot of people don't know that in Revit. If you use tab, you can select one of the pattern lines and you can move the pattern.
What was that tab?
Tab. You can select any of the lines, so I can select the horizontal and do the same thing. You can also rotate the pattern. Yep. And that affects the render material as well. So it's a really useful option for rendering when your textures don't turn up where you want them to. So that's all material assignment. Then you need to get into the materials themselves. And so I thought I'd just give you a couple of examples with those, so I've got this concrete material, which is one that I use all the time. So I'll select that floor, and I'll just show you how I've set it up. I'm just going to go to Edit Type, Edit, and again, just grab that material. So it's called Concrete Cast in Place Grey, and going to the Appearance tab, you can see there how that's been set up. It's actually a generic material. So I'll make that again from scratch, just to show you how I've done all that. It's not as hard as you might think, making all these materials and putting in pretty much all of the settings on your own. So you'll find that the materials as they come from the library aren't very good, but you can definitely make them look beautiful and render realistically, putting in all these settings. So when you right click on Appearance and then go to Replace, like before, of course that takes you to the library. So then you might have noticed, well, firstly, we've got all these different folders. Which one is the best? Appearance, of course, yep. Appearance Library has the most and usually the best. So then Concrete is where I've taken that one from. And so then you might have also noticed that it tells you the type. And that's actually really important. So there is a concrete material type. So I'll show you that one. I'll just grab one of these. So I'm double clicking on them to open them. And so notice how here it says concrete, and I don't have all the different slots that I had before. And that's important. I'll grab another one, so I'm just going to replace again, and I'll get something completely different. We'll go for wood. So notice how here again, I know it's going to be a wood material because it's telling me the type, and it's really important that you know that. If you go for another wood that's generic, you're going to have different properties. So with this wood material type, again, we only have a certain number of options. So you can't make wood transparent, for example. Now, if you decide later that you want to make it transparent, you can still do that. It's just that it can't be done with the wood material. So that's when you duplicate as generic. So it keeps it the same. So notice how the material looks the same, still using the same image, but it's then added all these different options. So I could make it glow with self-illumination, or I could make it transparent. Well, they've tried to make it easier to make those common materials. So things like wood you use all the time. Wood's generally not transparent and generally doesn't glow. So they've given you the options that wood normally would have. And the finish, it's actually really good. So glossy, semi-gloss, they work really well. The relief pattern as well. With wood, you get the option to base it on the wood grain, which is essentially using the image up here. So a lot of options that are really just to do with wood. But if it isn't going to do what you want, you've always got the option of duplicating as generic. And then you get all the options. And this is actually from 3ds Max. I'm going to switch over to Max in a minute and show you a bit more. But I'll go back and replace this again with a concrete. And so, like I said, those templates aren't bad, but I tend to go for the generic because I'll often want to change some of the other options. So I'll get the one that I use all the time, flat grey 1. Usually, yeah. Okay, so I've got this concrete, but it's not a concrete material type, it's generic. Yes, yeah. I mean, you can alter the concrete as well, but yeah, you can alter more this way. So, first thing, when you've got a material that has a texture, in other words, using an image file, like a picture or a photo of concrete, you need to set the size. So what size do you think that should be? So, not really. Depends on what the material is, yeah, but not what. I mean, if it's concrete, it's going to be the same size, no matter what it's applied to, generally. Yeah, at least a metre. I mean, you can tell just by looking at the image and then visually trying to think how big that material is in real life. So yeah, at least a metre. But then a good trick with 3D or just with rendering generally is to oversize materials. So I'd think about making it even 2 metres to begin with. 2 metres wide, and then whatever height it ends up being. With the tiling there, has anyone played around with that? Yeah. With Revit, it's a stupid option. You just leave it on tile. There's no point using none, and they're the only two options. So always tile, but that actually is an important option in other programs. It's just in Revit it doesn't do very much. So that's enough. So the size is probably the most important thing. You might look at the offset for the starting point, but otherwise the rotation might be the only other option if you want it to be at a different angle. So you can rotate any of your textures here, but I'll leave that at 0. So that's important. And then if it's polished concrete, what do you think might be another important option to make it look shiny, or to have some? Yeah, you can. That's very good actually. Yeah, that's I was thinking of another thing, but yeah, glossiness definitely. Yep, I'll be doing some glossiness. And then reflectivity. So reflectivity can be a tricky one. This is where you need to maybe start getting into the physics of your materials a little bit more. But I can give you a really good tip here that'll take you a long way. Generally, with reflectivity, the direct reflections should be lower than the oblique. And this is something you'd all be familiar with naturally, especially if you're looking at things closely, if you're doing a lot of drawing and rendering, particularly reflections. You tend to see reflections a lot more when you're viewing something at a steep angle. So you'll see reflections if you look at people in the distance on a shiny floor, but then when they're close up to you, or if you look straight down, you're not going to see yourself reflected like you would in a mirror when it's perpendicular or vertical reflection. So that's the direct reflections. Direct reflections often will make it look like a mirror if they're too high, but oblique reflections can add a lot of realism. So, oh, that's just so that's the brightness here is really high, so I can bring that down, and then also the glossiness will have an effect there as well. So, funny, high glossiness is going to give you more of a highlight on the edges, essentially, and then it'll make it darker for the main surface, for the diffuse. So here again, so generally you want direct lower than oblique. The direct should be at least half the oblique reflections. That's the general, well, that's my general rule over years of using it. We'll maybe go into the others later, because I don't want to spend too long on this. So we'll go and have a look at that now when it's rendered. We'll go back into a 3D view. And even on draft, that should look okay. So we'll hopefully start to see some of the reflections in the concrete, but we don't want to see it looking like a mirror. Okay, on draft, we're not going to get a lot of detail, but I can see already there are a little bit of reflection in the distance, but definitely nothing close up. So this gold surface is much more reflective. Maybe I'll put a really reflective one onto this tab. So if we go to edit that and look at the material, it's called stainless, but I bet you it's not. So here, if we go to appearance, it's just a flat material. They've called it stainless steel, but it's obviously not anything like that. So I'm going to replace it with a metal, and there is either any of these, but the chrome is probably as good as anything, so I'll just go for chrome polished. So you can see this is a metal material, and it doesn't have the options for direct and oblique, but this polished option is going to set the reflectivity. And beer taps are one of the most polished things you probably ever find, so that's probably perfectly right. Okay, so you can see that's actually going to slow it down. Even just that little thing has slowed it down a bit. So that was the tray actually. So I'll do the taps. Obviously, don't know my beer taps. So, what's that? The stainless. Oh, right, okay. So the spigot is the. Yeah, so I'm just going to choose the same material. No, it looks like it's disappeared. That's just because the material's dark. Okay, there's just one other map I want to show you, and that's the bumps. So you can see there already we're getting these nice reflections, which has a lot of realism. That's another trick in 3D rendering, to make things a bit more reflective than they are in real life. Shiny tends to give a lot of realism, even if it's more shiny than it would be in real life. So then this wall over here, you'll see has actually got quite a bit of texture. So I'll show you that material. And, sorry, I've gone to the wrong one. Okay, so this gloss black, it is, well actually, sorry, it was glossy. I've set that to matte, so I'll put that back to glossy. But then you also saw it has that texture, and that was from the bumps. So all of these slots in 3D rendering terminology, they're called maps. So each of these slots is a map. So the bumps are a map, or it's called a bump map. And so here it's using this image of, it's probably stucco actually, but it's called plastic. And so that gives a bit of depth to the material. Where it's dark, it's going to be deeper, and where it's light, it's going to be higher. So this one's probably a bit hard to see clearly, so I'll change it to one that is much clearer. Yeah, maybe I'll do this. That could be interesting. So I'll do this. It's a fencing material, but I'll see what it looks like as a bump map. So it's still got a size, just like the other textures. So here it's only 200 mil. I might make that. I'll make it 1,000, just so that it's nice and clear. So now, even on this preview, you can see what the bump map's doing. It makes it look like it's got some depth, even though in reality, the surface is still flat. And the giveaway is when you look at the edges. You can see there's no depth. And I'll increase the amount just so that you can see that more clearly. So you can see there we've got the depth there showing clearly on these surfaces, but on the edge, again, it's perfectly flat. So it's a rendering effect. It's not changing the model.
If you wanted to get that looking like actual mesh.
Yeah. Oh, you want to cut out? Yeah, well, that's another map. I'll do that. Okay, so I'll just render this quickly so you can see that effect. And remember, this is only on draft. It'll look a lot better when it's higher quality, of course. And so if it isn't obvious already, I'm trying to encourage you to focus on Revit for the still renders, even though I'm sure you're all looking at using Lumion for the animation. You might want to use Lumion for the animation too, but for the still renders as well, but I actually don't mind that. But Revit will do a much better job for the stills than Lumion will, generally. Yeah, actually don't mind that. So, okay, so let's do a mesh. Let's do a cutout. So I'll go and make a new surface. I'll just make a wall. And I'll make it, let's just make a 20 mil mesh screen. So I'll go and duplicate this material, and we'll call it mesh, unloop. And then I'll replace that with a material that's closer to what I want. So in the library, you'll find there are mesh materials already set up. I've forgotten what they're called, so I'm just looking through here, but definitely in this folder somewhere there's a mesh. Does anyone remember what it's called? Oh, is it? Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, there should be one here. I'm sure there's one here. Here it is. Yep, Saturn screen there. Or one. Yeah, there's a few, but that's definitely one of them. Okay, so that's just got some of the setup done. But you can always do this yourself. So you do it with cutouts. Yeah, but it can be any, as long as it's got the cutouts option. So here you can see it's got this image assigned, and well, I'll show you how to do this from scratch. If you don't find that material, I'll set it to. Oh yeah. There's a few of them. Yeah. So actually, maybe I'll go for zinc. Yeah. So then, if you turn on cutouts, at first it'll probably be on one of these procedural or these preset patterns, where you get these different templates that you can use and set a size. So I'll make it a bit bigger, just so that it's easier to see. So that's a square pattern, and you've got all these other presets, which actually are pretty good. So that's already going to give me a pretty good screen. But you've also got the option of custom, where you can choose your own file. So I've put a whole bunch of maps just for this purpose on the folder in the P drive. If you go to the, where you look normally interior design, and then material images, and then cut out. So these are all images for this purpose. So I've got there one similar to the cyclone fencing. I'll go for something different. Let's go for the vessel block pattern. Something interesting. Okay, so just like the image map, the diffuse map and the bump map, this image needs a size. So that's fairly small, 200 mil. Maybe I'll make it 500. And then I'll make the width the same. That's the height. Oh, that'll do. That's better. So where can this go? Maybe stick it over here. Okay, so you can see the mesh there. That is. And you can combine those materials with image maps and bump maps and all the other things. So you can see there it's a fairly matte sort of material, but just like any other material, I can go and adjust that. Okay, so instead of the plain old zinc, I'll go for stainless, and that's going to change the appearance. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Yeah. But then what you see, the bit that's left over, of course, is still controlled the same way as all the other materials. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it makes a huge difference for that, because the model out would take forever. So even though I have my screen similar to this where I've modelled it, depends on, because notice how with this, you can see that it's actually hollow on the inside. So that can be an issue. And if you want to look more real, then you'd have to model it. So the final thing is to show you maybe then how to manage all of those maps, because after a while you're going to have a lot of your own images that you've assigned and you've used in these different materials. Again, the defaults are okay, but you'll find much better when you're looking online. So I did want to show you some 3ds Max as well, but I think I'll leave that for another time. So I'll just show you again where I've got these map files. So have you all had a look at this one on the P drive, that material images folder. I've reduced it down a bit. It used to be really big, but I've taken out a lot of the old maps, so it's not quite as big. It's still quite a few gig, but it's not. It was about 80 gig before, but now it's it's down to, what is it, 2, so that's okay. So lots and lots of images in there, and you'll find even more if you search online, of course. So what's the keyword when you're searching for these things online, when you're looking for textures like this? Exactly, yep. Texture's probably the main keyword, but yeah, definitely seamless will help. So
How do you find ones that don't have stock?
oh, you just got to search. Otherwise, you've got to pay. Yeah. So there are companies that just make material textures, and they they charge quite a lot for them. Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So again, seamless though is good. Seamless, if you want to use that keyword, will help. But texture is the most important one, and so you've got seamless texture, timber or wood, concrete, and if you're looking for free, then you do just have to go through and try and find some good ones. Have a look for the higher resolution, so you can use the search tools here to set it to at least to large. Okay, so these all look like good textures. But then to adjust them, you're better off using Photoshop than Revit. So this one's very warm, for example. In other words, very saturated and warm. So I'll adjust that. Okay, that didn't do what I expected. Okay, so let's just say it this way. Okay, so I'm going to save this to the same folder, and we'll call it warm wood. Okay, so like I said, it's very warm, probably too much to be used, but again, we can adjust that. So there are options in Revit to adjust the materials or to adjust the textures within the material. But again, Photoshop is probably a better option. Okay, it's actually a pretty horrible texture, but I'll again just quickly make some adjustments anyway. Okay, so maybe saturation's a really useful one, and then make it a bit lighter as well. Okay, so then I can assign that to something in Revit, and so I might just quickly make something. And okay, so I've got my new texture. I'll just place this one. Okay, so I've got my new texture assigned. Maybe I'll just quickly check the size. Okay, we can see it there. But what's going to happen if I go to another computer? Am I going to see that wood texture again? No, absolutely not. Right, so, and the reason is that it needs to know where that timber image file lives or where it's stored. So, there are a couple of options there that'll help you. Probably the easiest one, and the one that I use the most, is just to keep everything in the one folder. So, if you've got your Revit file saved in a particular folder,
The Autodesk has it in the maps folder.
yes, that's right. They're the default textures, but if you've added your own, you're better off keeping them in another folder.
Okay, that's
Yeah, yeah. So I've got my grey wood, so I'm going to copy that and store it in the same folder where I've stored this Revit file. So this is where I've saved my Revit file, so I'm going to keep a copy there. Right, so that usually works. If you then open that file from that folder, it'll find the texture if it's in the same folder. Usually, but not always. If it doesn't work, then there's another option, and this is a bit more foolproof. This always works, and so the option there is to add it as a path, as a custom path. Yeah, a custom path, P-A-T-H. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so on the main menu, if you go to options, do you all know about this options option? So that's actually one of the most important things in Revit for just adjusting your settings. So again, on the main menu, it's an easy one to miss, I know. So again, on the big application menu, the R, then options down here next to Exit Revit. That's where you got all the program options. So if you go to rendering, then you can click plus to add in your own path. Okay, so it's rendering and then plus, then you get a new path or a new slot, and then you have to browse to choose the path.
So if you're jumping from a home computer to this computer, and
Yep, that's a good point. Yep.
that's what you would set up?
That's right. If you're moving from one computer to another, you need to do this on each computer. So here I'll choose that folder and I'll make a new folder for my custom materials. And then I could place everything, all my custom images there, and Revit's always going to find them on this computer. If you go to another computer, you've got to do that again.
So yeah, so when we come into school, we're always on a different computer.
Yeah. Yep, so you need to do that each time. That's the only way. Yeah. No, I'm still recording. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that will always work. But try the first method first. Keep everything in the one folder and you should be okay, and then you don't have to keep doing that on each computer. But if it doesn't work, and you'll know straight away because you won't see your textures, do this, then you'll see all your textures. Yeah, and if you tend to use the same computers, it'll help. Okay, so nearly, is there anything else about materials? No? Is there anything else you can think of about materials? So I haven't talked about Photoshop or anything like that. This is 3D rendering, but of course you can do lots of texturing with Photoshop and get some beautiful results when you mix the techniques. So don't forget the Photoshop rendering techniques as well, where you put the textures in manually. Yeah, curtains, that's another one. I'd probably do it with Photoshop. Unless you need to see them in your animation, then you have a, you'll need a 3D curtain. But if it's just for a 2D render, like for a still render, much better just to overlay them with Photoshop usually. Unless you're lucky and find, I've got some pretty good 3D curtains, but they're really only for 3ds Max, not for Revit. So, yeah, tint can be tricky, yeah. It does, yeah, that's right. So think of tint like a film of plastic over the material. That's the way the physics works. So say you've got tinted glass, you can have the glass colour and then a tint over the top of that. And if you think about physics, how it's working, it gets pretty complicated how you wind up at that final colour.
Yeah, if you go to adjust it, it's scale quite.
Yeah, Yeah, no, tint's really hard to use, especially in Revit, because the feedback's not very interactive either. Much easier in Max, but then that's the whole other thing. So, okay, so look, what I'll just quickly do is point out with 3ds Max some of the differences. I'm not going to spend too long on this, but just to give you a basic idea, because it's a good thing to know about theory. And just so you understand why people use Max instead of just doing everything in Revit. Just to give you a basic idea of the differences. So it might seem like there are quite a few options in Revit for materials. And I'll just show you again. So materials here, if you look at a generic, let's just find a generic. Okay, so you've got, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 slots. 7 different map types, things you can adjust. In 3ds Max, I'll just grab an Arcan Design and show you the difference. Okay, so these are the maps that you have in Max. Now, you actually do, technically these live in Revit as well, it's just that they're buried or hidden. But notice how many more options you have. This is how much further you can take it, and people who do this for a living do use these things all the time. So they're all the options, and that's how much further you can go with it. So I won't even count them, but there'd be 30 at least. And it might seem really technical and out there, but they all have a purpose. And there are some amazing things you can do with materials when you get into it. So if you're wondering, that's why people use these more high-end 3D programs to do more complicated things. And when you see a V-Ray render or one that's been done or by a high-end architectural visualization firm, that's one of the main differences, the fact that they have all those options. Okay, so notice out here that that floor texture. There's a bit more going on there than just bumps and reflections. Yeah, yeah. So the main option there that I know they're using is that there's a mapping of where the shininess occurs. So it's shiny in some bits, not in other bits, and then there's some other things going on. But yeah, so there are reasons for those other maps. It's not just a technical thing that they do for fun. Most of it is an artistic choice, or they're there for artistic reasons. I won't spend too long on that. Oh, there's the Utzon, that light there. That's I'm pretty sure that's Utzon. Anyway, doesn't matter. So here you'll see another one. So that rug there, I'd be pretty sure that that is a material, not a model. You zoom in on it. So it's not just a bump map, that'd be a displacement map. So it's basically like a bump map on steroids. And yeah, you can do lots of other things with maps. But if you learn them in Revit, it will give you a good idea about maps generally, and then you can apply those things in other 3D programs like 3ds Max or V-Ray or anything else. So, unless anyone's got any other questions on materials, I'll finish that one there. Ah, good. Yep, good.